We're in Sefer Yetzira EP8, the 5th Mishnah. Eser spheres bli ma, midosan eser she'en lahem soif. We're talking about 10 ways of approaching the force that dwells within all. And the force that dwells within all is known through the force that dwells within us. We're the metaphor. Just like there is a world with all the different parts and within it rests one, the one that created it, he's the one that dwells within all and gives them the power to be. So too we have a body that has many different parts, and within it dwells the one that lives in all parts, the one that is the reason why they are all the way that they are. And we see the unity by the interaction. We see that they're not parts that can exist on their own, but each part is complementary to the system that is all parts together. This is a demonstration of the unity. It's a demonstration of the force that dwells within all forces, how all of its parts together are creating the universe. And this we refer to as the 32 paths of wisdom. But here we're talking about the 10 sfirot, the 10 intelligences, the 10 forces, but they're not really 10 forces because they're one force. But these are 10 aspects of one force. And so these 10 aspects are like the soul that dwells within. And so they have no real definition. There's no way to define the soul. How can words contain soul? Soul is the force, the intelligence that comes forth with words, that creates languages, that creates sentences and stories and books. And so how can we contain soul in words? And so they're called blima. They have no definition. They are known and not known at the same time. The lower ones are closer to be known, and the higher we go on the ladder, the more they are not definable and not knowable. They are the cause of all knowing. And so these 10 that are not knowable, but yet we want to know them. Why do we want to know them? Because how else would we know how to go about ourselves? If we're not going to know them, what we're going to know what we want based on what other people are doing? We're going to know what we want based on whatever we decided as a child? We're going to know what we want based on reading a book? We just said that a soul cannot be contained in words. And so where are we going to find our soul? And so we want to know these aspects of this force because that's the way we interact with reality. That's the language of the soul. This is why it's called Lashon HaKodesh. It's holy because it's not the language of the physical representation of the senses. It's the language of the soul. It's the language of how the soul can find itself. It's a language that has access to the internal realms, so that the soul can know itself. And so these 10 aspects of one force, they have limits that have no end. Midosan eser she'en lahem soif. They are measuring, they are creating, they are the cause of creation. But this measure has no limit. It's a limit without a limit. It's a form with no form. How do we understand? Because if we were to think, let's say, about love, and so love is one way of thinking. And so we say, it's a limit. You're limiting your thinking now. You're only thinking about love. But love has no limit. You can think and think. You can grow and grow, and you still won't get to the edge of love. Love has no limit. And so even though we've limited the thoughts to thoughts of love, we still have unlimited amount of thoughts to think. And so the same way the spheres, they are midas, they are measurements, but they are measurements that have no end. And so chesed, which represents love, it's a measurement. It says there's a certain type of flow coming from the source of consciousness, but it doesn't really limit that flow. It gives it access to an inspiration that has no limit. And these are the attributes of the divine. The attributes of the divine, they have depth without limit. A human being, based on the amount of access he has to the divine, those are his limits. This is how much of that attribute he can contain. So, for example, a human being is going to experience love, and so he's going to experience based on his vessel. And the divine love is going to flow in his vessel. If he has a greater vessel, then he's going to experience more of the love. Who's giving him the love to experience? That's the divine force. So if he goes higher, he goes closer to the divine, he feels more the love of the divine. That's the love that's filling him, based on the amount that he can contain in his vessel. And so the divine love has no limit. If we can love like Avraham Avinu, then it's right there. It's loving us. The question is, what is the size of our vessel? And this is always the rule for what we're going to receive from reality, is that based on my vessel and what I allow in, and therefore the divine shines through me, that is going to result in what's coming my way from the divine. Because I've dressed the divine in those attributes based on the vessel that I prepared for the divine. I prepare a vessel, the divine comes in, and then based on how I dressed the divine, that's what I'm going to receive from the divine. With the same measurement that we measure, moeded and loy, this is what is going to get measured. And so these are called attributes that have no limit, that have no end. And now he's going to give us the attributes, the depth of the beginning and the depth of the end. This has to do with time, beginning and end. Also space, beginning and end. And so there's a depth with no limit. When the mind is going to think about the past, there's no limit how far it can think back. It's based on the context that it creates. It thinks back a minute, it thinks back a day, it thinks back a year, it thinks back 10 years, 100 years. It doesn't have a limit because it's the olam hamachshava, it's the world of thought. It goes and goes and goes in whichever direction you take it. And so it has the omek reishis and omek achris, the depth of the beginning. My beginning, where was my beginning? We might say when I gained consciousness, but my vehicle was already picking up data way before that. And so we might say when I came out of the womb, we might say when I entered the womb. We might say when my father was born. We might say when Avraham Avinu was born. We might say when Noach was born. We might say when Adam was born. When did I start? We might say when the earth was conceived, or the sun, or creation itself. Where did I start? We might say before creation, and we might be right. And so time in the world of thought is without limit. It goes and goes and goes, the beginning and the end, and so it's space. There's a depth of good and there's a depth of evil. It has no limit. Whatever a human being will imagine, does the imagination have a limit? We see people, they do the unimaginable. Well, they imagined it and then it went there. It has no limit. The good that's going to be revealed when we know why we're here, that's way beyond anything we can imagine. Because the good has no limit. What we've seen has limit. What we understand has limit. What we can imagine has limit. But the good, it has no limit. And good is present in all dimensions. This is how we see in all of creation. Good is the approval of the Creator that it should be so. And good, on every level, in every dimension, what does it mean? It means whatever in that dimension means pleasure. Versus Ra means whatever in that dimension means pain. And so pain and pleasure are a physical demonstration of good and bad. Good and bad exist before the physical. But the physical demonstration of good and bad is pain and pleasure. This is the simple translation. Now today, the world has been so manipulated, we can't use pain and pleasure as signs of good or bad. Humanity has made it so that pleasure leads to bad, because there was evil intent. But the natural way of, in every dimension, to know which side is the good and which side is the bad, the pleasure is the good and the pain is the bad. Until we go to a place where there's pleasure that has no pain against it. And this is the real place from where the world was created. The pain and pleasure was created after man fell from grace. Before man fell from grace, there was no pain to counter the pleasure. There was just good that was pleasure. Through the Eitzadas Toiveras, through him going into the world of thought and good and evil, he manifested good and evil. And then there was good and evil. Then there was pain and pleasure. Before he could imagine evil, there was no evil, because it didn't exist in the world of thought. And so in every dimension he was tuned to pleasure. And then he fell, and then in the dimension that he fell, he feels pain and pleasure. He became consumed with the body in order to learn pain and pleasure, and now within the body he can't find the access to the pleasure that he was looking for. Because the body is not the place of the primary human pleasure. The primary human pleasure is the soul. The soul needs to be extremely joyous that it exists before the body is going to be able to contain the right level of pleasure. If the soul is not happy to exist, and then the physical body is trying to compensate for the lack of the will of the soul, then there's going to be a constant need for pleasure in order to remind the soul. But that's only because the soul is not satisfied to be here in the first place. This is the real area that needs to be addressed, is that there needs to be pleasure for the soul to be, so that it doesn't require the body in order to justify its being. And so there's a depth of good and there's a depth of evil. In the world of thought, they go without limit. In the physical world, it depends what type of idiots we have around. That's how far it's going to go. Depends what their imagination can come up with, and if they have the power to pull it off. And unfortunately, we live in a time when there are a lot of idiots. This is why the world is looking like a tragic mess. It's the human imagination that's going there. We all participate in this great revelation. We all have a part in it. But boy, do we have violent and extreme people alive. And this relates to the way that we believe. When the more evolved ones, when the more refined humans don't have accurate beliefs, the more physical humans, the more animalistic humans are going to express that in physical violence. So because the refined humans are the heart and the soul of humanity. And when the heart and the soul are corrupt, then the manifestations are not human friendly. And so this is a direct result, because these people don't think for themselves. The violent people are usually not big thinkers. And so the spirit that lives in them is not theirs. The spirit that lives in them is of the more refined thinkers. But when the more refined thinkers don't think accurately, have the wrong beliefs, then the unrefined take that spirit, and that's a violent spirit. And this is where we see the violence in the world. It's the fanatical people among us that fuel the fanatical people among the nations. It's the violent among us in their beliefs, even though in their behaviors they might seem very refined because they're afraid, but their beliefs are not accurate. They are violent, and they are giving power to negative forces. And so those beliefs fuel the anger in the other nations. And this anger comes out in their own violence between themselves and in their violence against us. And so this relates to the depth of evil, that it has no limit unless we're going to know how to believe, unless we're going to become more refined in how we approach our internal being. Then those external manifestations are going to continue. This is just nature happening. This is just how the spirit expresses itself. If we're going to realize beliefs that are accurate, that contain the sanctity of the seal of the source, then all of humanity is going to have a very different experience. There's tremendous frustration within humanity. And this frustration is not because we want to be frustrated. We're not consciously asking to be frustrated. It's because we are frustrating the will. We're frustrating the revelation that's trying to reveal itself through us. And when that will is frustrated, we see that as frustrated humans. There's a way that the human was meant to be. When we will not comply with that way, then the frustration will happen. When the frustration happens, people will start pointing fingers. This is just part of the frustration. It's not because they've understood the problem. And so the only way for us to help the world heal is to cleanse our hearts, is to be more authentic with the one that's trying to dwell within our hearts. It's to remember the real nature of the experience that we're having, how it comes to be. And then we go towards a depth of good that's never been seen, that's never been tasted, never been experienced. It's been alluded to, but never properly spoken about, because it can't be spoken about. They speak about having a big party, the Suda of the Levyasan. But the purpose is not a party, the purpose is something else. The purpose is the reason for the party. Why now are we having a party? What are we celebrating? And so there's a depth of good that will justify all the bad. We will appreciate that it was designed this way. We wouldn't want to have it any other way. And then there's Omek Rum v'Omek Tachas. Now we're going to the sixth direction. So we had the first four, the beginning and the end, the good and the bad. And now we're going to the six that are left, that are the six dimensions of space. And so Omek Reishis v'Omek Achris has to do with time, the beginning and the end. Omek Tov v'Omek Ra, the good and the evil, are the dimensions of soul, the dimensions of consciousness. And now we're going to go to the six dimensions of space. And through this we have space, olam, time, shana, and consciousness, nefesh. So in olam we have the six dimensions, up, down, left, right, front, back. In shana we have reishis and achris, beginning and end. This is for time. And in nefesh, in soul, we have good and evil, the dimensions of soul. Until soul, there are no such dimensions. No such dimensions exist anywhere outside the human soul of good and evil. Good and evil is something unique to us, and not only to us, but to us after we took on a certain condition, after something went wrong and we sort of lost our minds a little bit. So this became a reality that we have to face, that we have to fight with, is that there is a depth of good and a depth of evil. And so after comes Omek Rum v'Omek Tachas, the depth of up and the depth of down. Omek Mizrach v'Omek Ma'ariv, the depth of east and the depth of west. Omek Tzofim v'Omek Dorim is the depth of north and the depth of south. Adon Yochid Melech Neman Moshe B'Kulam Mimoin Kodshe V'Ad Adei Ad. And there's a single master that is the force of the loyal king. It's the force and it is the loyal king. And he is in charge of all the sides and all the directions, from his lofty presence until forever and ever and ever. And so this single one is beyond name, is beyond letter, is beyond symbol. And he's the king. And yet the force that he reveals himself through has aspects that we can discuss. That's how close we can go to this king. And where do we find this king? We find him everywhere. And yet he's nowhere to be found. We find him everywhere because he is everything, dressed in everything, surrounds everything, and fills everything. And we find him nowhere because we don't have the revelation. We don't know how it feels to realize his plan. So we don't have a proper context for what's happening in existence. So we have existence. Oh, we have him. But we have a fallen version of it. So we don't feel him. We don't understand him. We can't relate to what's going on. There's a disconnect between the one who is the king that is within all and the way that he's experiencing himself within what he made, which is disconnected, which is fallen. And this is what we have to return. This is how we unite the name, as if we can bring back what fell to its original glory so that it can reattach to the source. And so in all these different depths, there's one force. In all your thoughts, there's one force that's drawing them. Look for him. Don't get so concerned with his drawings. Look for the one who is drawing. Let him draw himself, which is impossible, but trying will help, because it's going to erase some old drawings. It says, "Esse spheres bli ma midos en esse shein lem soy, ba loy mai, af al pi shenosim b'hem shir b'mispar esse, אויס השיר שנוס להם אין לסוף ולא תכלס, ושמספר 10 כל המספרים. בלי סוף כן האויבים והנפסודים שאין להם סוף כולם מסגלגלים באלה המספרים. So it says, Midosan 10 שאין להם סוף, it says because within the 10 there's another 10. So each 10 you can split up to 10, and each one of the 10 you can split up to 10. So you can go in, you can zoom in to millions and millions of numbers from these 10. These 10 are the beginning of everything, of all numbers. And yet from these 10, you're building numbers upon numbers, millions upon millions, and it's all related to these 10. So the same thing, everything that came out of these 10, and yet there's no limit to what came out. And they're all moving through the numbers, they're all moving through creation. So from each one of the 10 comes out 10, and from that 10 each one has another 10. Is there a number to his groups, to his army that keep coming forth? לפי שהעמוד מן המורגש והמורגש מן המסקול והמסקול מן הנעלם והנעלם מן הסוף לפי החומר 10 שאין להם סוף. So it says all these 10 relate to the layers of creation, and the layers of creation all lead back to the source that has no limit. And so the movement of the nature of the body is directed by the emotional. The emotional is directed by the intelligence. The intelligence is directed by the energy that is already leading to the infinite one. And so everything that's coming forth is coming forth without limit. Based on how the vessel is ready to receive, this force will make itself present. So a lot more can be present in the body if the body has the spiritual vessels to receive more. And these spiritual vessels have physical footmarks. There are physical changes that happen to our organs as they align with their spiritual design. Just like if we learn to use a certain organ, or we learn to sing, or there's any type of skill that we're teaching any of the organs, then we're going to see also physical changes in the organ as we're learning and training the organ to do whatever it needs to do. And so there are physical differences that happen as a result of the emotional, intellectual, or spiritual changes. But all of them have no limit. There's no end to how far we can take it, because it's all coming from a source that has no limit. The one who is the root of all beings unites with them all. From him they come forth. So if we go from one level to the other in the spiritual levels, if we go from the physical energies that move our body to the emotional energies that relate to our emotions, the emotional are much more subtle. And if we go from the emotional to the intelligence level and to the different movements within the brain, those are much more subtle. And if we go from there to the collective energies that are vibrating and keeping us all in the same settings through the night and the day and through all the different vibrations of the stars, so we go to more and more subtle vibrations, more and more subtle changes, and it keeps going and going. It has no limit. It gets more and more subtle, more and more refined, and this way it leads to something that, as far as the human being is concerned, has no end. The source is present in all of them the same way. Even though each one is a different vessel and therefore it receives the light of the source differently, it expresses the light of the source differently, but the source is present for all the same way, and therefore they all have no limit, because they all somehow embody or dress the energy of the source and that source has no end, has no limits. Now there's the different ends, the different depths, and there's different ways of explaining which one. We have 10 spheres, and the 10 spheres are somehow represented by the 4 and the 6. The 4 is beginning and end, and good and evil, and the 6 are the 6 directions of space. So the most obvious way to go about it is to say that the 6 directions of space are the 6 attributes. Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. This would be the simplest way of going about it. But there are many different ways of splitting them. We'll see how the Ravid goes about it. And the other 4 is the 3 on top and the Malchus. So the other 4 would be the Keser and the Malchus, beginning and end, and Chochmah and Bina. And so we'll see how he goes about it here, the Ravid. So he says, Omek Reshis, Omnam HaYeser Yisborach Reshis Zesib L'chol HaMitzom V'derech Shatzir Zesib L'chol HaMitzom Ken HaChochmah Reshis L'chol HaMitzom Shneim Rab Masech Hashem Kulam B'chochmah Sisa Moletz Keninecho. So he gives Reshis to the Chochmah. The beginning is Chochmah because Kulam B'chochmah Sisa. V'omek Achris Shneim Ani Achri Remes Asod HaYovlim, which is the Bina. So Reshis Chochmah, Achris Bina, because Achris is the one that brings everything out into manifestation. From the Bina it goes to the Midas, and from there it comes out to the Malchus. So, Omek Achis Shneim Ani Achim Remes Asod HaYovlim, Lefichach V'sefat Lecho Sheva Shapse Shonim Sheva Pomim. You count 7 times 7, which is 49, and then you have the 50th, which is the Yovel. Lefichach Shvi Kodesh B'Yomim, Ki Mo Yom HaShabbos. So the 7th day is Shabbos, so that's like Achis. That's the Tachlis of the purpose of creation. Omek Tov, Chesed. Kitov Hashem lakol emetiv b'chazdoi, afilu l'rishoim. L'bilti yidach men nidach. So he puts good, the right side, by Chesed. And he says, what is Midas HaChesed? Midas HaChesed means that the source is good to all. And to all is not simply talking to those who behave properly. All means all. And so the source is good to all. What you will meet before the source, the people you will meet, the thoughts you will create, the angels you might interact with, they are not good for all. Some of them are good only to the righteous. Some of them are not good to anyone. But if you get to the source, whenever you're interacting with the source is good to all. He's good to all, also to the ones who are righteous and also to the ones who are wicked. What does it mean to be good to the wicked? It means to put them through a process so they're no longer wicked, so that they can also participate in creation. And so he's good to the wicked. He's so good to the wicked, he created an entire system of how to cleanse them. That system is called hell. It's not a pleasant system, but it was designed as a favor to the wicked. Without hell, the wicked would have no share in the world to come. But when the Creator created, everything that was created was going to get to the end result. And so for the good, for the righteous, okay, simple, easy. They participate in creation. They're a partner in creation. But for the wicked, those who go against creation, how are they going to participate? For them, there's a process. And through that process, they get to participate. And so it says, Tov Hashem lakol, imetev b'chazdei afilu l'Hashem. He's kind even to the wicked. Lebilti yidach men nidach. He won't leave one soul to get completely removed from him, because it's his. And so at the end, he's going to have his. Al derech havai v'hefsid. He will make them into many different things, and at the end they will become something that can participate. When creation was made, that the physical space became, and it was filled with existence, it was filled with some type of a molecule that was already physical, that exists under time. That happened once, and since then no new particles were created. Everything was made from within that dough. Whatever it was that came into being, that came into being, and from that everything that exists was built. And so after creation was created, something out of nothing, since then nothing will become out of nothing, and also there won't be anything that will become nothing. Everything that came into existence then is going to continue existing for eternity. And so everything that was created then and not later. There was never again existence coming out of non-existence. Physical existence coming out of something that doesn't exist physically. And everything that came into existence is going to see the end of this process. Nothing is going to get lost. Yes, they're going to continue and change their forms constantly. But nothing is ever going to get lost. Everything is going to get cleansed, and everything is going to be part of the future. And an additional rule, there won't be that whatever became from whatever. There is a rule for how it went from the original state that it was when it became until it is now the way that it is now. Something happened, there was a chain reaction that resulted in it being exactly where it is. There's no spooky movement where something just became something. Everything has an exact explanation how it became originally when it became, and that's all that ever became, and that's what's going to stay until the end. And so there's a rule for everything that happened. How did it become what it became? So it says, it won't happen randomly. There has to be a relationship. There has to be some form of a relationship between what was and why it became what it became afterwards. Because the human being is a collection of all that exists. That's why he can become everything and everything can become him. He can be a fruit, he can be an animal, he can even be an inanimate object, and he can also consume them and they can become him. And so the soul that dwells within a human being is the soul that originated in all of the beings. Therefore, the human being can be all of the beings, and all of the beings can be the human being. There is a relationship between them that is the reason why, from the original way that existence came forth, where there was no change that isn't according to the process of creation and how things evolve, the human figure can become all the different figures. And where is this described in the pasuk? Because it says, "Nasa Adam b'tzalmeinu kidmisenu." Once Creator, once the Spirit that dwelled upon the waters came forth in all the different forms, once there was a creation that had within it all the different creatures, the source that created these creatures said, "Nasa Adam, come together and we're going to create man." All the forces together, each one is going to give what he has to offer, and I, the Great Spirit, I'm going to dwell within him. And so this is why it says Nas Adam, it says B'lashon Rabbim, it says let's create man. Let's create man because all of creation is participating in this new creature. There's not only a human being participates in this soul, also the plant souls and also the inanimate objects, everything that was created. And so the purpose of evil is good. And what's the good of evil? The good of evil is that people have a chance to be evil, and then they have to eat their evil, and then they learn to be good. And so this is the good of evil, is that it heals itself. The evil comes to the evil, and it consumes the evil. This is the original design of the evil. Humans have become very clever, and they manipulate the evil. They throw their evil at others. But the original design was evil should eat evil. Not that people should pass on their evil and figure out ways of other people suffering their evil, but that the evil should consume the evil, and then no one will want to be evil. And so through them they become good. So the Ra is one of the names of the mid of the left. It has to do with Gvura. Like the pasuk says, Yeriah. Yeriah is like a lashon of Ra, lashon of bad. Af Yatzirach, also he will scream. Af also means anger. Al oivav yizgaber, he's doing this in order to overcome his enemies. And so evil is here to overcome the enemies of creation. This is the purpose of evil. V'asod lama re'osa lama zeh shlachtoni. שנאמר וירא בעין השם אשר עשו וסוד בעין המוישה רע. So you see this concept of evil when things go wrong and there needs to be punishment, then there's evil present. And so this is why Moshe asks HaKadosh Baruch Hu when Klal Yisrael is in Mitzrayim, he asks, why did you make evil come forth on them? Why did you allow them to get contaminated by evil? Because once they diverge from the path, evil will come and get them. Rizal בפוסק קראו קרוא נגד פניכם כוכב ששמו רוב וכוכב נאדים המוקר בצד הדין ולא אחר ואש וסוד כשם לקח איש אוכלי אלקנו. And so as we're going to learn later on, there are different forces that are in charge of bringing forth these midas. And so there are the stars and there are the planets. And they are the ones that bring out into manifestation all the attributes. And so here we have the Omek Ra. It says that Ra relates to Mars, because Mars relates to Gvura, relates to violence and war. Mars was the god of war for those who were worshipping the stars. And so Paro could see that Mars was going to somehow interact with Klal Yisrael after they leave Mitzrayim, and so he said, "Re'u kira neged penechem." You can see that evil awaits you. Evil awaits you. If you leave now, Mars is going to have an interaction with you that's going to invite evil. It's going to be a manifestation of evil. At the end, that influence was mitigated through bris milah. They had bris milah at that time, and there was a lot of blood that came forth on that day, because for many years, as they were traveling in the desert, they didn't do it. And then it says, Hayom nigleises chepes Mitzrayim alechem. Today I took off the power of the spell of the Egyptians that was on you, relating to the force of Mars. That Mars gave its influence, but in a more friendly way, in a way that was intended for kindness and not for violation, not for violence. And so this is why Hashem is called Eish Ochla. Hashem Elkanah, we say, is a jealous God. He's a God that can take revenge. It means that the forces of Mars is in Asiya. Mars is in the lowest world, the soul of Mars. The physical Mars is in the world of body, where all the higher levels live in the world of body. But the soul of Mars is in the level of Asiya. It's in the lowest world. But it receives its flavor from the Midas HaGvura, which is in Atzilus, which is closest to the essence of the being, where it comes forth, this flavor of being, which is a flavor of protection. And so, because he has this flavor, and as this flavor comes forth, it dresses up in the influence of Mars, and it becomes a physically violent flavor. So therefore he is called a fiery God. He's a jealous God, meaning that he has the forces to protect himself and the forces to take revenge when we violate the will that created life. And this is what we experience when we are seeing war within humanity. What we're experiencing is the violent God. We're experiencing it in a fallen state. We're experiencing it when an individual who is disconnected from the greater will is using that in order to go to war. But the essence of what's being revealed, why does that human being have the power to direct his spirit in such a direction? What is it that he has access to? What is he channeling? This is the divine power that takes revenge when we offend it, when we violate truth. And there's a force within nature that says, oh, this needs to be protected. Here we really have to go in and make sure that it happens the right way. And so this force is being kidnapped by the evil, and then they take it to war for the wrong reasons. They take it to take revenge from their personal enemies. They take it to do all kinds of damage in the world and invite further evil. But the essence of what they're channeling the jealous God. They're channeling the force that's here to make things right when they go wrong. וצורך התלדס שכשם שהוא אש מחלה וסיבל ההפסד יגן סיבל ההוויה כרדי אש יזבש לי וסמזגה יסוידס ואחד מיסוידס אמש. So you need to know that just like the fire, this force, the force of the fiery God, he is a force that annihilates, but he's also a force that gives life. Just like the physical fire, it can burn the house, or it can cook, it can unite different forces, it can create renewal, it can create aliveness, because through it they get softened and they unite with each other. And it's one of the main building blocks of creation, like we will learn. The three elements, fire, air, and water, are one of the three building blocks that are included in the 22 letters. So the good, which we said is the side of chesed, this is represented in the water. So it's fire and water. And there's also the other way around, where sometimes the strength, gevura, will be called water, and the passion of kindness will be called fire. And so it can go in both ways. But the general way, when we speak about fire, we're talking about the left side, and water, we're talking about the right side. So the same thing, the water, just like the water is a reason for creation, the water can also cause damage. Like, for example, that a human being can drink water and it gives him life, or if there's too much water, then he can't live. That's what happened in the Mabul. That the Mabul, what did they do? The people, they wanted good for themselves, they wanted pleasure. So they were grabbing at the tzad chesed, and this resulted that their punishment came through water. Because they didn't have the vessels for what they were trying to contain. The Ruach Hashem, the Ruach, which is the air, is what's machriya between the chesed and the gvura, between the fire and the water. So we've had over here the Reish is Chochma, the Achar is Bina, the Tov Chesed, and the Ra Gvura. This is how he's splitting them up. Now we're going for Emekrim. Now we're going to go to the 6 directions. So these were the 4. Chochma, Bina, Chesed, Gvura. Now we're going to the 6. It says Emekrim Adain Sav Remez LeKeser Elyon. So room, the high up, who is high up is the Keser, the first sphere. It says on him we have no description, because how can you describe nothing? And so we just know that from there comes forth all existence and all blessing and all kindness and all good. So that's the room, that's on top. The lowest one, the depth of below, he gives to the Malchus, which is the last of all the spheres. And the bottom is where everything goes to be processed, and therefore the Malchus brings things out lefoil. Omek Mizrach is the east. There are square galgalim. Galgalim means the wheels of the chariot, and this relates to the stars that are rotating in their spheres. And so these rotations represent the higher wisdom as it manifests into existence. And so there are also square ones. There's a circle within a square. So when there's a circle within a square, then the chariot can run, and when there's a square within a circle, it doesn't run. So this is why he has the 4 directions of the world as part of the Merkava. This is part of how it rotates. And this has to do with the basic directions of life. This has to do with the 4 elements that represent these 4 directions. And this has to do with the Merkava of the Shechina, that is the 4 Malachim, Oiriel Refal, Michal Gavriel. And so this represents also the process of consciousness, that whenever something is coming forth, it's going to come forth from one of these 4 directions. And this is like a wheel. This is how the wheel of consciousness is turning. The wheel of life is coming forth. Is that we're constantly going through different areas within perception, and we're experiencing them. We're filling up different boxes in different times, and everything is getting categorized, and everything is getting sorted by the angels within that already know their work. They know where everything belongs. And then in the sleep, they're filing everything away and preparing everything so that it's more accessible, so that the brain and the organs can all have the right information and do their functions. And so Mizrach is one of these 4 sides. משם של י' בייס, בהם מזגלגל שמש אימוגן הוואי צפוז בכל י' בייס הוואי בי' בייס חדושים. And so there's 4 directions. Each direction has 3 havayas, has 3 combinations. And this is talking about the name. The name that has 4 letters, that has 12 permutations, like we said, because it has a duplicate letter, so therefore it has only 12 permutations. So these 12 permutations are divided 3 to each direction. 3 start with a Yud, 3 start with a Vav, and 6 start with a Hey. These 6 that start with a Hey are split 3 and 3. So we have 4 groups of 3 permutations. Each one belongs to a different direction, and this represents the 12 zodiac signs. And the 12 zodiac signs are 3 signs for each element. So the 12 zodiac signs are split between the 4 elements: fire, air, water, and earth. And for each element, there's 3 different zodiac signs. And so within these zodiac signs, which are like personalities, they're expressions of the greater being, these expressions of the greater being, within them rotates the one that shines. He shines within these 12. And when he shines in each one, he's slightly different than when he shines in the other ones. And through these 12, he gives life to the world. And so now we're going through the seasons. We're going through 4 different seasons. Each season has 3 months. And through them, the force that lives dresses up in different clothing, and then we experience him differently. In winter, we experience very different than we experience in summer. And so, in 1 month, the force of life will come in a way where he is bringing life, and throughout the summer, we see this life come forth until it gets dried up, and then the winter comes, and there we see the same force dressing up as a force that takes away life. And then again, it will come back and it will recreate life. And this is the cycle of life. This is the cycle of existence that we're experiencing. And so all these processes, Al Pi Hashem Yachnu, Al Pi Hashem Yisoy, they rest according to the name, and they travel according to the name. Against this we had in the Midbar, the 12 tribes were set as 4 groups. There were 4 different Degolim, 4 different flags, each for a set of 3 tribes. And they were around the Mishkan. And this was representing how the zodiac signs all are manifestations of the original one that dresses up in the 12 different ones. So the same way the original one, which is Yisrael, dresses up in the 12 tribes, all of them are representing the same being, just different aspects of the being. And the same goes for the Dalet Chayes HaKodesh, the 4 animals that carry the chariot, the lion, the ox, the eagle, and the man. They represent these 4 directions, the 4 elements. So all this is coming forth from the depth of the east, which is the mid of Tiferes. That when the revelation of the Tiferet will happen, when the source that shines through all the 12 different permutations will be revealed, so then you won't need the sun, because the light of the world will shine in you. V'en oimik mezach is Tiferes. Oimik Ma'aref, Perish Yisoid, Ki D'Amr Razal, Mesechtes Chagiga, Beperik Basa, Shchina B'Ma'aref, Ki B'Yisoid Mis'arvim Kol HaKoiches. So the Yisoid is called Ma'aref because Ma'aref is a lashon of mixing. That's the place where all the elements are getting mixed. Like when we create a child, the Yisoid is receiving from all the organs, and there it's putting all the forces together in order to create one unit that's going to result in an entire being that's going to have all these parts. And so in the Yisoid, all the parts are getting mixed together in order to be reproduced as one. And so Hoid, he puts to the left. Hoid is on the lower left, the left foot. And Oimik Dorem, the Netzach, Netzach on the right, which is the south, he puts Netzach, which is the right foot. And so this was the order that he gave us. He gave us Oimik Reishis Chochma, Oimik Achres Bina. He gave us Oimik Tov Chesed, Oimik Ra Gvura. And then up is Keser, down is Malchus. Mizrach is Tiferes, Marev is Yisoid. Tzofen, north, is Hoid, and Durham south is Netzach. And so he said all 10, so that you should know that the depth goes and continues in all directions. It's not like we'd say that the source is on one side of it and whatever is against him has a limit. But no, the source is dressed up in all of them, and therefore all of them have no limit. V'zeu sod mimamakim kirsicha Hashem. And though the Melech says, I'm calling you mimamakim, what does it mean? It means my mind is already traveling into the depths of your midas. I'm experiencing a very deep experience that is in one of the depths of the directions of where I can go. Like when someone is experiencing suffering, when someone is experiencing the difficult side of life, so he's in the depth. He's in the depth of the midah of Ra. And so from there he calls out, mimamakim, he calls out to the source that's dressing up as everything, that now I'm in this distant place. Now I've lost access to the root from where I was getting all kinds of inspirations. I don't have access to that root. So mimamakim kirsich Hashem, from there I call out to you. Whenever you see the word oimek, this is the type of oimek it's talking about. And then it says, Adon echad yochid el melechnem u'moshel b'kulan perish b'chol ha'amokim anishpoim, that all of these depths are coming forth from one point, from one source. Mimoin kacher, from his holy living space, from his holy abode. Where's his holy abode? Perish mibina v'chochma ibavov shel kacher shehu lanista v'lanerem remez al keser elyon nikra ma'oin ki ma'oin shaloim shneim ma'oin le'kedem. So from the moichin, from the source of intelligence, which is the keser, as it dresses up in the chochma, as it's understood by the bina, from there come forth all these different depths, all these different possibilities. And this is called mind, this is called the abode. Why is it the abode? Because there's no movement. In the world of attributes, there are constantly changes. Based on what's happening down here, there's a reaction from up there. But in the intelligence that's beyond the attributes, there's no movement. So this is the home. This is where the force is dwelling, and from there he comes forth. Ad adayad perish ad abina sheikhen ad, va'ad adayad. Like the lashon of sheikhen ad, the one who resides upon eternity, because there's no distinction to his existence. And so it's called ad, means forever. The permanent continuation of everything that is includes his resting place. He rests on all that, because we're talking about something that is beyond space and time. And so this one that dwells within all these different directions, in these different depths, this is the one that last week we learned that you should return him to his throne, that he's the one that's supposed to be in charge. So if one of these 12 took charge of the being, then the being has lost access to the one. And then the deeper it goes into that one, the deeper, the more it goes into the ma'amakim of that part of the being, but it loses access to the whole being, the less the one has access to his throne. And so therefore he said, we need to properly understand what is happening. We need to properly understand the center so that we can return him to his throne, because he is the king that dwells within all. And this king, he is the one that's present. Before him we are acting. The one who is observing everything that's being done is beyond consciousness. Consciousness is where I'm experiencing myself as presenting a reality in front of the king. Who is the king? The king is the one who is really experiencing it. There's someone that is behind consciousness, that is experiencing consciousness. That king, he is beyond all of us, and yet all of us are catering to him. What are we catering to him? our consciousness, whatever it is that we perceive. And so when we get lost into the depths, we're taking the king with us. And that king needs to be returned to his throne, because he represents the divine intelligence that desired it all. He is the will that made it be so. When we return everything to that will, that's when we will have the revelation of what this was meant to be. That's when V'hoy Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz, the king is going to appear upon the whole land. B'yom hahu yeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad. That's when the revelation of what consciousness is revealing is going to match the being that is being revealed. This is the unification of the divine bride and the divine groom. May it happen now. Thanks everyone.